Welcome to the Great Divorce Podcast, hosted by divorce financial analyst and retirement planning counselor Andrew Hatherley. Join Andrew and guest experts as they help late-life divorcees build the financial and mental foundation for a meaningful future. There is life after divorce. Now, on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to episode 32 of the Great Divorce Podcast. This is our last podcast of 2023, so I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I recently had the opportunity to be a guest on the YouTube channel Real Talk Las Vegas. The host, Joe DiRaffaele, and I go back quite a while, and we also have a mutual client that Joe references in our discussion. In the interview, I discuss the gray divorce phenomenon, my personal experiences with gray divorce, and what led me to create the Gray Divorce Podcast. I hope you'll find the conversation informative and interesting, and so without further ado, here it is. Oh, all the best for a happy and prosperous 2024.
Well, welcome to Las Vegas Real Talk. Excited to have our next guest on today. It's kind of an interesting story, before I introduce our guest, of how we wound up meeting. I have a client that has been a client of mine going back probably about 27 years. And I feel blessed that every year we meet up and we discuss what's going on with her real estate and her properties. And throughout the majority of that time, she has also told me of another trusted advisor in her life, and that's our guest today, Andrew Hatherley. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Joe. Happy to be here.
I know you've got a lot going on, so hope we'll make this meaningful today, not only for you, for our audience, and I do appreciate you taking the time to hang out and share a few words.
My pleasure to be here, and I'll try and make it as interesting as possible.
Fair enough. So you and I have intersected over the years multiple times, and mostly because of that client that we talked about. It seems that our worlds have intersected this time on purpose, because we seem to be serving some similar niches in terms of clienteles that we're representing. But I'd like for you to share a little bit to our audience what it is that you do, other than being an advisor. That's pretty global.
Right. Well, shortly after I moved to Las Vegas in 1999, still find it hard to believe that I've been here for this long, I became a financial advisor, and principally serving folks approaching or in retirement. And that was kind of my bread and butter. Well, in 2015, I went through a rather contentious divorce, and I learned that I didn't know much at all about divorce finances. And by this time, I was 52 years of age. And when the process was finally over, like 9 months and more money than I cared to divulge over, I thought, wow, I could really add a lot of value to people like me who are going through divorce, midlife, late life, and help them with the financial aspect of divorce, and incorporate that into my financial advisory practice. So essentially, what I did was I still serve my existing clients, but when it comes to outreach for new clients and prospecting and marketing, I really focus on the niche of what's called gray divorce, which I went through in 2015 without knowing that it had become a societal phenomenon. But it's really the only area where divorce rates are increasing is the over 50, and particularly the over 65 group. So in 2017, I earned the designation Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and opened an outside business activity that complements my investment advisory firm called Wiser Divorce Solutions. So with Wiser Divorce Solutions, I started giving workshops on the financial aspects of divorce, and started working with people essentially before and during divorce to help them get through the process with as little stress as possible, both emotionally and financially, and hopefully to put them in a position where, in working with their attorneys, where they're looking forward. And it's not just about dividing the assets right here and now, but we're setting people on a solid financial foundation for the next 20, 30 years of their life. And my investment advisory financial planning practice, Transcend Retirement, is kind of the next step in the process. That's where I work with people on an ongoing basis, hopefully for the next 15, 20, 30 years, whatever, depending on how long I can last. I just celebrated my 60th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And work with people once again to find meaning and purpose in the new phase of their lives, after mid to late life divorce.
So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I'm quite verbose. So.
Yeah, no, that's okay, and I appreciate that explanation. The first thing I want to talk about is that concept of gray divorce. Is that something that was coined elsewhere, and that's a thing, or is that a term you came up with, realizing that this phenomenon exists?
My first exposure to the term gray divorce came through a scholarly article called The Gray Divorce Revolution, which was published, I think it was 2012, by two scholars from Bowling Green University. And what they had identified was increased rates of divorce for the over 50 population from 1990 to 2010. Whereas in 1990, maybe 1 out of 10 or less than 1 out of 10 people getting divorced were over the age of 50. By 2010, it was 1 in 3.
Wow.
And the rates have been going up even more for the over 65 population over the course of the last 10, 15 years. So it really, the term, I came across it through the scholarly article, which really brought a lot of people's attention to the phenomenon. I've seen it referred to as silver divorce as well. Obviously, it refers to the gray that we get in our hair, not only from aging, but also from going through a difficult divorce.
Earn your stripes.
Yeah,
somewhat.
for sure. It's
well,
quite a process.
I know from personal experience, I went through a divorce much earlier in my life, in my 30s, and financially, that was a significant reset at that point. However, and I understood it at that time, I knew I had a long runway.
Yeah.
I mean, like, okay, I got my knees taken out from underneath me at that point, but I got a lot of years left in the game. I would imagine for anybody approaching 50s, 60s, in that realm, you tend to be unwinding a little bit more, right? Like in terms of that fire, that drive, that I'm gonna go take on the world every day has shifted, and so. I mean, I see the role that you play as being absolutely vital because, that time to set aside, and I'm going to use the word retirement, and that means a million things to everybody.
Yeah, it means a lot of different things to people these days.
But typically it means a slowing down of some format in terms of the financial end.
Yeah.
So what do you think one of the harder parts is for somebody going through that and looking at this reality, and then here you come in of saying, hey, these are things we need to look at?
Well, there's so many things. And you mentioned the key distinction with the gray divorcee versus somebody's getting divorced in their 30s is they've got less time to recover financially. Mm-hmm. Typically, you're seeing your net worth cut in half in divorce. You're forming two households. So one household is becoming two households, so it's very difficult to continue with you just can't continue with the same standard of living. So there are expectations that kind of need to be set, and I think people realize that they're going to take a hit financially. But it's when you're going through divorce, you're not in your best position emotionally, and
Sure.
quite often your imagination runs wild, and you start thinking all these terrible things are going to happen. They rarely do. It's just natural that you think that because your world's being thrown upside down. You may be in a marriage that's been 20 or 30 years, or you may have been planning for retirement, as you say, and slowing down. You may be in your late 50s, 60s, planning retirement, and all of a sudden you're thinking, well, how am I going to pay spousal support? Or they're saying that I'm going to have to work for the rest of my life to pay spousal support. I don't want to work till I'm 80. So
Right.
these things cause us concern and cause us a great deal of worry when we're going through divorce later in life. Having said that, on the flip side of the coin is, and I always try to put a positive slant on it because life's better for me now. I was divorced in 2015. I've recovered financially. I've experienced an awful lot of personal growth, and I had always planned at retiring at 60. Well, here I am at 59 starting a podcast and, getting out and meeting more people than ever and really trying to, fly the flag for education about how to thrive after late life divorce. And that's kind of re-energized me. And so the idea that, we hit a number and either age or savings, and then we retire to a life of golf or tennis or cocktails on the beach, that's kind of getting to become more of an outdated thought with respect to retirement. People are realizing that what a good retirement is about is having something purposeful and meaningful to do with their lives and to do it with people that they love. And the relationships and the connections are actually more important for late life happiness than the money.
I so appreciate you sharing that aspect of a definition or an alternate definition of what retirement is. I have a lot of peers, people I went to college with, and they're asking questions like, well, you've done well. When are you going to retire? And I'm like, I actually love what I do. I get to work with people I want to work with. What am I retiring from? But there's this cultural thing that says when you reach this point, your definition of cocktails and golf and all that, is that fulfilling? And I don't know that it is for many people. And I've had family members directly, as well as many clients, and they've retired, lasted 6 to 9 months, and went, yeah, this isn't making me happy. So I'm going to go back in and engage in different things.
Yeah. I think the key, Joe, is that retirement, and however you define it, you should be, let's say, just leaving the job that perhaps you want to leave, but you should be retiring to something as opposed to necessarily retiring from it. So people are thinking, oh man, I can't wait till I'm done with this job. That's great, but that's only half of the equation. To be happy in your golden years, which are being extended out further and further with longevity and life expectancy, you've got to have something to retire to. And, a day at the golf course might be a novelty when you're working 40, 50 hours a week. But if you're facing it every day, then, I don't know. Maybe some people can have fun playing every day. I wouldn't.
It could be a bit, now that's my task, right?
Yeah.
Incidentally, if you wouldn't mind, mention the name of your podcast and where people can find it. I want to make sure our audience
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to get a plug-in for the Gray Divorce Podcast, and that's Gray, Gray. The Gray Divorce Podcast. You can find it on all the podcast outlets. I think Apple Podcast is probably the most popular. You can also find an archive of all podcast episodes on my website, transcendretirement.net. There's a page dedicated to all the podcasts and the recordings of all. I think we're up to episode 26 now. Nice.
Yeah. So one thing I want to jump back to that you had stated, or at least this is what I heard, is you're almost playing somewhat of a role of a therapist, not a therapist or doing therapy, but you're helping people recontextualize like this vision or definition that they've had. And to your point, it could be quite devastating that all of a sudden you're on this path and then the path has changed. I would imagine that takes a great deal of trust. How do you create that with people to get them to get to that place where they're now open to hear this new definition, or this new recontextualization of retirement?
Well, I've come to realize over the course of the past 5-6 years that perhaps the greatest gift that one person can give to another person is to inspire them. Mm. And I do find that in the work I'm doing now, there is hopefully an inspirational component to it, simply by getting across that there is life after divorce, and it can be a much richer, improved life, because frankly, you're emerging from a situation that wasn't right for you in the first place.
Yeah, probably not the most healthy environment.
And it is an opportunity to reset. It's an opportunity to grow. And, I found that what's the old saying? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There's a lot of sayings like that. I've come to realize having quite an element of truth in them. One I particularly like is nothing great happens inside your comfort zone.
Oh.
And certainly, I went through a lot of discomfort in my divorce, but I came to realize that post-traumatic growth is a concept that I've come to learn a lot about, and you can grow from these difficult experiences. I mean, it's your choice. You can take the vicious cycle down or the virtuous cycle up, and obviously it's difficult. Can be more difficult or different for different people. But I know personally I've accomplished more things since my divorce. I mean, I've gotten in the best shape of my life.
Nice.
I mean, sure, when I was 18, 19, I was
Right.
thinner,
Right,
but, I could probably lift more now than I could back then. I sleep better, I eat better, I quit smoking. I wrote a novel with an Emmy Award-winning producer. I've started a podcast, I've started another business, traveled a lot more, met a beautiful lady, remarried 2 years ago.
Congratulations.
So there's lots of good things happening, and I think you can get a virtuous cycle going. I think one thing, it's another element altogether, but I'm a big proponent of positive psychology, and there are tools that we can use to better understand ourselves and our relationship to the world, and I think being grateful for what we have is probably one of the more difficult things to do, but so very important.
It's probably one of the more powerful things that are available to us that doesn't cost anything.
Right. Well, it costs some effort,
right,
because
you do have
it's
to take
easier
the
to be. Frankly, it's easier to be bitter and resentful about the world
Mm-hmm.
than to think, what are some great things about the world and how can I make the world a better place, and get out of my head a little bit and start thinking about, helping others in the work I do, and ultimately, once again, it's kind of like the virtuous cycle. It's good for business as well. I mean, helping people without necessarily expectations of return or immediate return is, I think, a good operating principle.
I have a friend of mine I had lunch with just a few weeks ago, and he's of Japanese descent, and he shared with me this concept called, and hopefully I'm going to get it
I
right,
think I know where you're going.
Ikigai.
Ikigai.
Ikigai?
Ikigai.
Yeah. And it's having a purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so what I'm hearing you talk about is for anybody out there that is either in this position, facing this position, or have just come through a great divorce, and it's your opportunity. Now, as you said, and I'm going to use a victim mentality, right? And I'm not making anybody wrong for it, but to blame and shut down and be frustrated and angry and all. We got to go through a grieving process anytime anything like that happens.
And believe me, in some divorces, there are victim situations.
Absolutely.
So,
100%.
there are people who've been very poorly treated by their spouses and need to recover, need professional help, and that's where a qualified emotional counselor should come into play. I'm not a psychologist, but I have experienced the benefits of some tools of positive psychology, Ikigai being one of them,
Mm-hmm.
which is like 4 concentric circles to try and which ask you questions and try and hone in on your life's purpose. There are personality tests I think are very important to help us understand ourselves. Concepts with respect to balance in our lives and how we deal with balance in our lives. And another thing is emphasizing our strengths. I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but
you're on topic.
This is an area I'm very, very passionate about, is that I think it's become very popular, over the course of the past 10, 15 years to talk about following your passion and following your bliss. Well, my bliss might be playing right wing for the New York Rangers, but it ain't going to happen. They're a hockey team for anybody who doesn't know. I think what really the focus should be on is emphasizing our strengths and understanding ourselves and what we're good at, and using those strengths and maybe tilting it a little bit in a way that brings us more happiness and fulfillment, to serve others in our businesses. And I think we'll ultimately feel a lot more satisfaction as we use our strengths to bring the best of ourselves into the world. And believe me, it's an ongoing process. I'm not.
No, probably it's
we're all works in progress, right?
Right.
But
what I take away from this discussion, and I can see, why you're so successful in this area of helping people navigate through these waters. And obviously, having gone through it firsthand, you can relate to the experience very much so. But you also bring a very kind perspective into what's possible in redefining and retextualizing as people are moving forward. And I'm assuming, because of your financial advisory, is putting the psychology as well as the strategy together.
Very much so. And I would say I'm the type of financial advisor who focuses more on return on life than return on investment. That we should put our lives first and see how our money can be used to underwrite or support a life of meaning and contentment. And that doesn't necessarily mean going out and buying the latest BMW 7 Series or a $100,000 cruise. There's a distinction which comes up quite often in conversations I have with people, the distinction between wealthy and rich. And I think a lot of people without much money are wealthy because they've got great family relationships, they're doing a job that means a lot to them. It may not pay a lot, but they're happy and they've got fulfillment in their lives. And as I said before, I think one of the major studies from Harvard has shown that what really brings happiness and contentment, particularly in their later years, is our good quality relationships with other people, rather than having $3.2 million in a bank account to support fancy cars and clothes and all that sort of thing, which really don't provide a lot of substance in our lives. So there's that element of, yes, money is important, obviously, in meeting very important hurdles of shelter, food, transportation, all the things we need. But there's diminishing returns over a certain level of income. And working in the divorce space, I've seen quite a few people, high net worth, and we're talking high net worth, who are not happy in the least. And in my travels, I've seen people, living in shelter that's barely above, subsistence level, but you can just tell they're happier. Now, I'm not recommending subsistence level shelter to anybody,
right.
But it's a cliche to say money doesn't buy happiness, which is true to a certain extent, but you do need a certain level. Once you figure out what it is that makes you happy and is going to provide a meaningful life to you, you want your money to support that and not necessarily just work to build your bank account. And let's face it, the financial services industry quite often is concerned more with just building a large bank account and not spending it and
right.
not using it to underwrite an important life. And so that's where I may differ from a lot of financial professionals.
What I'm hearing from you is that you really help people get clear and define their life experiences that they're looking to have.
It's a conversation I'll have with people.
Right.
Not everybody's going to...
I get it. Not everybody's open to it, but it's how does the finance part come in and align with that? So now you've got the money and your passion, your enthusiasm, your zest for life working in the same direction, whereas oftentimes people have them going in different directions.
Right, and so often it's keeping up with the Joneses and the fancy house, the fancy cars, and
ego is
a big thing. It's a big thing. But I think as we get a little older, I don't know. I'm sensing sometimes age does bring some wisdom. I'm hoping.
I'm hoping too. Any last closing thoughts? Anything that you want to share that maybe I haven't touched on or I haven't asked as far as what you do, how you help clients, things of that nature? Any advice that you might give to anybody that's either starting down this path or in it?
Well, I think the most important thing for somebody thinking about divorce, or perhaps they've started the process one way or another, the most important thing is to get educated about how it works. I'm an educated person. I've got an MBA, I've got a lot of work experience, but when I went through my divorce, I was completely ignorant about the process because, let's face it, it's not something we really plan for. And in many times it comes to us, in a rush or as a shock. So I think the key thing is to get educated. And you need to get educated about the divorce process because there's many different types of ways to get divorced. I mean, recently on the podcast, I discussed the perils of do-it-yourself divorce, where people just say, oh, we won't hire attorneys, we'll just do it ourselves. Well, there's problems with that because quite often people don't do it right, and they end up revisiting the divorce 3 or 4 years down the road because things weren't filed correctly. On the other side of the coin is that you've got the highly litigious divorce with the aggressive attorneys. I mean, maybe in some cases you need that, but I think in most cases you should avail yourself of techniques like mediation, collaborative divorce, or a newer form of divorce called amicable divorce, which is incidentally just started up in Nevada. So you can find out about that on the Amicable Divorce Network. But if listeners or viewers want to go to one of my 2 websites, wiserdivorcesolutions.com, transcendretirement.net, or the Great Divorce Podcast, you can see lots of material with respect to education. And there's a lot of divorce professionals out there who can help. I help in the financial realm. There are specialists in mortgage lending, certified divorce lending professionals. There are specialists in real estate. And there are a wide variety of different attorneys. There are divorce coaches and, of course, marriage and family therapists, coaches and therapists play an increasingly important role in late life divorce, helping people maintain that emotional regulation. Because let's face it, this is usually the largest financial transaction that's going to happen in your life. And if it's happening late in life, you want to get it right as much as you can. I mean, it's not a great situation, but you don't want to make mistakes. And so get educated.
Andrew, I think that is outstanding advice. And, throughout my career here and there, I've been representing homes that need to be sold over the last decade. That's become more and more a part of our business, mostly because we're able to keep the fighting down between them, between the divorcing parties, and we have attorneys that'll reach out to us. But I will say to you, the aspect of getting educated, you're right. It's not something that a lot of people want to look at. Sometimes people don't want to look at those areas, but going in blind, definitely, you're in for a lot of shock. I'm going to put your contact info up on the screen so that anybody can get all the websites and everything. Is there anything else that we want to close with?
I can't think of anything else right now.
Yeah,
I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about
and I'm glad you're able to come in, and I'm thankful for our mutual client, and dare I call her a friend.
Definitely.
She is a sweetheart. It has been great. And so those of you that tune in, I would encourage you to look into Andrew, get to know him, get familiar with what he's at. Even if you're not going through a divorce and you're looking for somebody that can maybe help shape this next segment of your life in terms of how your finances can help fuel your life, your experiences, your passions, all that. You don't have to wait for something awful to happen. You can certainly take advantage of it long before then, and I know Andrew would be up for helping. And
definitely.
He is a definite, trusted confidant that I feel comfortable with because we have that relationship that has been back and forth between the two of us for years and years and years.
Yeah, it goes back a long way.
Yeah, right on, Andrew. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Joe. My pleasure.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on a future episode, and take care.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Great Divorce Podcast. To learn more or get in contact with your host, you can visit Andrew's website at transcendretirement.net. Also, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Information provided is educational only and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Each situation is unique and should be discussed with your tax or legal advisor prior to implementation. Andrew Hatherley is not an attorney and does not provide legal advice. Information provided is financial in nature. Advisory services offered through Hatherley Capital Management, LLC. Divorce financial analysis services offered through Wiser Divorce Solutions, an affiliated company.